Thank you so much for joining me for this webinar on the little things that make a big difference. We'll have plenty of time for questions at the end, but you are so welcome to shout out anytime during as well. You can just hit the reactions button and there's a raised hand icon in there to ask or share anything. I'm Anna, yoga practitioner, teacher, and teacher trainer. And the questions that I receive and the bat signals I see most often are all about practices getting stagnant and teaching feeling like a broken record. So today we'll dip into how micro changes, tiny little things, can make a macro difference to your practice and to your teaching, and why. So let's get rolling. If you'll join me in a tiny little practice by doing this, I want you to take one hand, palm up. Place your other hand, palm down on top of it. And then flip the top hand so that it's facing the palm. Back again, palm to palm. Back, front, back, front, back, front. A little faster, a little longer. Keep going. And maybe you'll start noticing that it's getting a little bit easier. You're able to do it with a little less effort, a little bit less thought. Stop. Switch hands. And start again. The same process, the front of the palm to the back. Just tapping and tapping and tapping. You're getting better at it rapidly. You're working it out quickly. You're thinking less. Maybe your mind is even able to start wandering. All right, let it go. And now I'll get back to that screen share to tell you about what we were just doing. Those were called RAPs, rapid alternating pronation supination. And what we do when we do that is we stimulate the lizard brain. The lizard brain is the most ancient part of the brain. This is basically all that lizards had for brains way back when, and still do, but we've evolved far from there. And doing that motion stimulates this limbic cortex, the lizard brain, the part of the brain that handles the very basics of life. The fight or flight, the feeding, the fear, the need to survive, the need to reproduce. And this part of the brain is automatic. We don't have to think about the things that it's doing. We don't have to think about balancing. We just balance. So I invite you for just a moment to close your eyes and to try that one more time. Those RAPs, the rapid alternating pronation supination. Switch hands. And release. And realize how quickly you got good at that. Let's talk about why. Because you were stimulating this super interesting part of the lizard brain, the cerebellum. It's the part of the brain that's important for movement and for moving well. It's one of the main functions of the cerebellum to send signals to the body, to adjust and to move. You can look at it like a cerebral choreographer. Most body movements require the coordination of multiple muscle groups, as we all know. And the cerebellum is what times these muscle actions so that the body can move smoothly, gracefully, without having to really think about it. It also coordinates eye movement, which is especially interesting in the yogic practices because of the way that we work with the yogic gaze or the drishti, which might bring to mind the way a lizard's eyes can dart back and forth. The cerebellum controls voluntary movements like walking, posture, balance, coordination, again, eye movements and speech. And if you'll bring your hands right up to the back of your head, you can actually feel where it is. You can feel that ridge where the base of the skull meets the top of the spine or the neck, the occipital ridge. And if you go right to the middle, there's a little dip. And right within that dip, snuggled into that ridge, is this walnut shell-shaped little beauty, the cerebellum. It creates reflexive movements, and it means brain within a brain, or the little brain. A huge amount of how we move is dictated by this little part of you, of your brain. And it helps us to be really accurate with our movements. It helps us to adjust and correct as we go. Loads of good stuff, but again, especially poignant and relevant in the yoga practice, where we're talking about challenging the mind and the body simultaneously, and knowing as teachers and practitioners that the body is always auto-correcting itself or working with proprioception, the tiny little stabilizing muscles and everything from the hands to the feet, up and down the spine, that are constantly on call to make sure that we don't topple over. And that's what the cerebellum does. It's in charge of correcting these mistakes. The thing about the mistakes is that we learn by making them. They're a good thing. Anything to do with balance and coordinating many movements, the cerebellum is involved in. And when we do something over and over and over again, like we just did with those wraps, we get really good at it. We make less mistakes. We don't have to try as hard, and we go on autopilot. And therefore, the cerebellum isn't being activated in the same way that it was when we started, when we do something new, when we make these big or little errors as we go. There's nothing wrong with habits. We need patterns and routines to get stuff done. The mind, the body, and even the soul thrives on ritual and habit. We gravitate what is easy or toward what's easy or effortless because that's a natural thing to do. We rely on what feels familiar, sometimes even when it's harmful. Our subconscious self finds these habits comforting. Additionally, we're engineered to conserve energy. This is something that comes from a long, long time ago when perhaps food was scarce. Way back before we were rolling around our yoga mats, when it wasn't only hard to find the food, but it was tricky to prepare, because the brain needs oxygen and glucose or food to function. And it takes up a lot of these resources. Even just thinking burns calories. So we can withstand difficulty and adapt in the face of discomfort, but since we live in a world of comfort, we really have to make ourselves, we have to have the willpower to encourage ourselves to do things that require effort in order to keep on adapting and evolving, or at least to keep ourselves in peak form. How do we do this? We seek novelty. That's new things. When we do new things, it takes effort. We have to think, we have to try hard. We often worry about looking silly. All things that we're biologically wired to avoid, yet need to thrive. There's even a name for it, neophilia, the love of novelty. So what is novelty and why is it important? Novelty is the state of being original, new, or unique. Novelty is significant because the human brain is always on the lookout for something new, always. And the sense of novelty activates the dopamine system directly. As a result, it enhances mood and positive outlook, motivation, and goal setting. All great things, right? A positive sense of novelty has also been shown to increase creativity in dealing with stress, lowers perceived anxiety, and can even lessen depression. Novelty induces dopamine release in the hippocampus. So just a little side note about the hippocampus. It's involved in long-term memory formation and memory retrieval. So think about remembering your yoga sequences. It also plays a role in spatial memory, which is allowing us to keep track of where we are in space and where objects are and where we are relative to the objects. So on a yoga mat, this could be props that are around you, or people who are practicing beside you, or the teacher who is sliding around in between the mats in front of you. And there are a few ways to improve your hippocampus function. So a few of these things are right here. You can learn something new, which hopefully is happening on the yoga mat all the time, and in life, of course, as well. Due to the way the hippocampus works, when you learn something new, you build new neural pathways and strengthen the ones that already exist. So here's our opportunity to work with building on the good habits that we've established, or to replacing ones that might be a little bit more on the perceived negative side. Another way to improve hippocampus function is to exercise, which is something that we tend to do on the yoga mat in a vinyasa flow practice and other styles. We practice mindfulness as well on the yoga mat. And supposedly drinking coffee can help improve function of the hippocampus. I'm not sure if this is true, but I am practicing it. So allegedly, people who seek novelty are happier, healthier, and even live longer. But if we're biologically wired to avoid these things that might make us look or feel silly, that might cause injury to the physical body or to the ego, such as trying a new sport or working out in a gym where everyone else seems to know exactly what they're doing, how do you think people can benefit in a yogic environment? We'll take a look at that. In yoga, if we create a safe environment for ourselves or for our students, if we're teaching, where we can remind people that it's not a competition, where we can invite people to breathe mindfully and to listen to their body, maybe even to set an intention for how they wish to feel or be right now, irrelevant to how they felt yesterday, no matter how differently the person on the mat beside them feels or what they're doing. We have an opportunity to introduce new things. We can get people to try something brand new and unfamiliar without it being so scary as it might be in another environment. A lot of people even inherently feel safer in a yogic environment than somewhere else, such as in a gym or doing that new sport. In fact, we know that many of them have come for some sort of rehab or healing or transformation. And if the nervous system, that's the lizard brain, the subconscious part, feels safe, we can invite people into this space of neophilia, a much better place to introduce things that are perhaps slightly uncomfortable or challenging. And this isn't just for new yogis, But the ones who've been at it for a long time, we too can be stuck in our head, uninspired, feel like a broken record in our teaching, or doing the same thing over and over again in our practice. When we seek out novelty and combine whichever form it is with other elements of yogic practice, such as movement or breath or gaze or stillness too, we're altering our brain waves and potentially heading toward flow state. Has everyone heard of flow state? Such a hot topic lately over the last few years, something that we're all seeking. So when we go through those different levels of brain activity toward flow state, we're moving into an experience of being so absorbed by an engaging or enjoyable task that our attention is completely held by it. This is radical presence. This is yoga. You generally lose sense of time, self-consciousness, and anything that doesn't have to do with the task at hand. In flow, you feel as if you could keep doing what you're doing forever. Additionally, flow-inducing activities flush stress chemicals out of your body and help quiet your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that creates doubt and worry and wonder, the negative self-chatter. Yogis even say this is where the ego resides. Flow also stimulates your brain to release a cocktail of 6 chemicals, which create what Jamie Wheal and Stephen Kotler, 2 current crushes of mine, have called STIR, which stands for selflessness, timelessness, effortlessness, and richness. Allegedly, in these flow-like states, there's a 400% increase in motivation and creativity. So, creating an environment that allows ourselves and our students to take these risks safely, to bring ourselves and our brains and our bodies into a state of flow or closer to one, to flush out the stress, increase creativity, and drive deeper feelings of awareness and empathy seems pretty incredible, right? So, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi is like the godfather of modern flow. He's written great books on it. You can YouTube incredible talks by him on it. He looks really huggable too. And he says, it takes effort to change traditions. We must first learn them to be able to impose our desires upon them. And this is like the takeaway from our time together today. This is what I want to leave you with how to do in a simple, accessible, applicable way. And it is all of those things. It only takes a tiny, tiny little 3% change in something to excite your lizard brain or light up your cerebellum. This rule, the 3% rule, also reminds us that we don't need or really want to overdo it. Our innovation doesn't have to be so wild and crazy that it's hard to teach or remember or follow. We only continue to learn, strengthen, and grow when we do new things. Remember, the cerebellum, it corrects mistakes, especially when it comes to movement. So by changing our movements beyond our habits, just 3%, we fire up the center of the brain. With a little bit of intrigue, we can activate the cerebellum to help us learn by correcting new mistakes, big or small. These are typically on the yoga mat, the ones that have to do with accuracy, balance, coordination, pretty much every and any movement. And on the yoga mat, we can have fun doing this. We can mobilize our bodies, strengthen muscles, work with the joints through new movements, new different planes. We can push the brain gently to learn and adapt. And the mindset will remain open and pliable, tolerant, leading to the happier, healthier, longer lives that yogis have always been after attaining. So the idea here is to figure out what you might be doing in your practice on autopilot, to notice what your habits are and use them as inspiration to change, and to change just one tiny little thing at a time, just 3%, relatively effortless changes that might take just a tiny bit of memory on your part to weave into your practice, and if you're teaching, to encourage your students to issue as well. And there are no rules to this except the 3% rule. Think of the tiny little nuanced habits, like the angle of your foot or your head, the directions that you're used to turning or spinning or moving, even the use of your gaze, your drishti. And also the planes of movement. You can build neural pathways by moving in different planes. And this isn't to say that you need to worry about the anatomy or the names of the planes, just to move in different directions than usual. Even just that slight 3% difference. And we can do this, we'll practice it together just a little bit in a moment. But you can do this through the very basics. In Tadasana, standing at the top of your mat, if your palms are usually facing forward, what if they face in or out? And what if you do that through your whole practice and that's the only change that you make? That's enough to fuel the cerebellum, to evolve, to create new neural pathways, and maybe to start softening some anymore. What if you point your foot slightly outward in a lunge rather than slightly inward or precisely forward? These are the things that we're talking about. Maybe a tiny little bit of external rotation in the front hip in a lunge, high or low, or in the shoulders when you reach up for Urdhva Hastasana. This can be beyond movement as well. This could go into changing up your music, to noticing how a different beat might make you want to move in a different way. No rules, just start to think. If this feels super familiar and habitual, how can I change it? This is simply becoming very, very mindful of what you're doing by paying attention to things and noticing if you're doing them just because you've always done them or because there's a reason or an intention behind them. You're allowed to change classical.
Can I ask one thing? 1 minute you're saying get into a flow state, which is slightly a meditative state, a non-thinking state, a just doing state. And then at the same time, you're saying, no, have novelty, change by 3%, think about what you're doing, be mindful. So they're both, to me, opposite, being mindful and paying attention. Is that not opposite to the flow state?
Yes, thank you so much for that perfectly phrased question. And this comes right down into the essence of the science of yoga as well. We're always working with the polarities and the dualities, the ha and the tha, and the light and the dark, the masculine and the feminine. And so here's where we go with those changes, or not changing, as you're saying, Jessica, to stay in that flow state. To attain flow state, the mind needs to be challenged enough to retain absolute and total presence. And when we get into autopilot in our practice, we tend to stop using those parts of the brain as much, like the cerebellum and the prefrontal cortex, to a point where we're in a place where often, not for all of us, but for most of us, like 99.999%, the mind then is able to wander onto whatever it is, to your shopping list, to what you'll make for dinner, to your to-do list for tomorrow. And so by implementing a change that's small enough that you don't have to entirely focus upon it, but that you're able to start sprinkling it in, such as the hand position in Urdhva Hastasana or in Tadasana, for example. You've hooked the mind in to be present again if it's wandered. However, you're not making it learn too many new things at once to the point where you're drawing yourself out of flow state potential and presence. So you're really, really right in questioning that. And I appreciate the poetry of your question very much. What do you think?
Thank you. Thank you.
And so you're right. As you choose, if you choose to start implementing changes where you've really come into a flow, you're definitely risking drawing yourself out of that flow for a certain amount of time. So it's really a dance there in between the comfort and the discomfort, which some people believe is what the asana practice is meant for, to teach us how to find comfort within discomfort on the microcosm of the mat, to be able to take out into the macrocosm of the world. So I'd be really interested to hear back what happens in your practice if you do start implementing changes.
Well, I do understand what you mean now. Yes, no, you do need to keep concentrating a little bit in order to keep focused. Yes, otherwise you start doing shopping lists. You're right.
It is such a question, though, which I go into more deeply in the creative sequencing course that I created for the EkhartYoga Academy, because there are so many practices that are set sequences that are beautiful and they're perfect. And yogis, worldwide for so many years have been doing those practices, same thing, an entire lifetime and maybe beyond. And same number of breaths for the same poses in the same order. And there's so much value to that for the people who find value in that. And there's equally value for those who come to a more creative practice, like the vinyasa flow practice that I suspect has lured most of you here. And so back to these little changes for just one more moment. Yeah, the more unusual something feels, the more effort you have to put into it and the harder the cerebellum has to work. So you could be going from those tiny little 3% changes up to much bigger changes, pending what you need, what you desire, where you're heading, what your intention for your practice is in that moment. But the more that the cerebellum is stimulated, the more your overall being has to adapt. And I think that's where we get into the deeper or higher philosophies of the practice. And basically, just remember that novelty and effort bring adaptation. The more you move your body in different ways, the more your nervous system will be prepared, like we just talked about, for life off the mat. It's like practicing for real life in the safe environment of a yoga practice. That's the microcosm, macrocosm magic. Though Patanjali in the sutras wasn't ever talking about warrior poses, we can. There are loads of different ways to change up the things that we call traditional. And the traditional yoga practice that we're practicing is only a few decades old, really. And by changing things up, we are working well beyond the physical into the energetic, emotional, and spiritual as well. And the way that we can start doing this is by tuning into those things that we're used to doing and feeling all the time, by kind of getting a gauge on what it is that we tend to gravitate toward, where we are on autopilot, by noticing, by practicing, playing, rolling around our mat. My 6-year-old daughter shows me this all the time. She invents things daily and nightly that are interesting or feel really good to her, at least, simply by exploring the world. So, I thought we could take just a couple of minutes, if you're game, to explore just a few of these tiny, tiny little things that we've mentioned that can make such a profound difference to you and to your students. So if you've got a little bit of space, go ahead and jump up and join me. And if you don't have the space to do it or you don't feel like it, just think it. But whatever you've chosen to do, I invite you to come into Tadasana, mountain pose, just standing in your space at the top of the mat, wherever you are. You're welcome to close your eyes or to look at me, but just let your awareness drop down into your feet and simply notice, where are they in relation to each other? Do you unite your big toes, or are your feet hips width distance apart, wider? What direction are they facing? Are they parallel, turned in, or turned out? However they are, I invite you right now to change that any tiny little bit. Maybe you turn your toes out ever so slightly. If your feet are together, maybe you heel toe them slightly apart. If you usually stand with your feet hips width, what if you draw them in just a little closer than usual? Take a deep breath in through your nose. And if you want to open your mouth and sigh that exhalation away, becoming aware of where the weight lands in your feet now. Do you lean into your heels, into the baby toe blade or the big toe side? Roll around the feet a little bit, from the heels to the balls of the feet, into the tips of the toes. Maybe you lift all 10 toes up off the mat with your next breath in, and press them back down to earth as you exhale, striving to equalize the weight between all 4 corners of the foot, or a tripod if that's your version. And then maybe you change even that up a little bit. Soft bend in your knees, press into your toes as if that single motion could send the inhalation flowing up the shins, through the quads, beyond the trunk to the crown. And maybe you envision the exhalation rolling down the back of the skull, down the traps, through the curves of the spine. Let your glutes soften a bit, your knees bend slightly, and the weight shifts into your heels. With the next inhalation, become aware of where the arms are. Are your palms pressing into your thighs? Or do you do the more anatomical man version of Tadasana with the palms pointing forward? What happens if you just let them go? If you let the arms hang heavy, the fingers be loose, maybe even give yourself a little wiggle, ooh, and then pause, just noticing where your arms have naturally landed. Draw the awareness further up through the belly. Do you suck it in like you're on the beach about to have a picture taken? Or do you stand in a more comfortable position? Are the shoulders high up by the ears? Or are they in a natural state? Where's your chin? Does it draw in or draw out? Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. The idea is just to make tiny little changes to these things that we do, usually relatively thoughtlessly. What happens if you drop your chin slightly to bring some length to the back of the neck? Maybe you press up just a bit through the crown. All right, with your next inhalation, reach the arms up, Urdhva Hastasana. Do you send them out to the sides or forward? And stay for your exhale, noticing here. Are your arms shoulder width, or do you tend to press the palms together? As you exhale, draw your hands past your head as they meet your heart. Lower your chin and begin to bow down over your legs. Let your arms go heavy. Uttanasana. Inhale and we'll roll up to stand. Again, letting the arms just be heavy so that the weight of them draws down on the shoulder girdles as the spine aligns. With your exhale, roll your shoulders back. And again, drop your awareness into your feet. Are they in your typical spot? Or can you change them up just any bit, 3%? As you inhale, we're going to reach up. If you usually reach out, take your arms forward. If your palms are usually together, open your arms shoulder width. And as you fold with your exhale, try your arms a different way than usual. Maybe you twirl your wrists as you go. Plant your palms on your shins so that as you inhale, you press into your shins, not just for leverage to lengthen the spine into Ardha Uttanasana, but so you can feel with your hands. And as you exhale, slide your hands down your shins, noticing the texture of your leggings or whatever you're wearing. And as you inhale, rise up to stand, maybe twirling your wrists again as you reach straight up to the sky. We're at the top, the palms unite. As you exhale, squeeze the elbows down, cactus style, blades together so the rhomboids get a scrunch. And as you inhale, reach back up. On the exhale, we'll fold. See if you can think of a different way to go. And at the bottom, extend your arms back alongside your hips. Leave them there as you lift halfway up, strengthening the spine and challenging the mind. As you exhale, bow. This time, wrapping your arms around your legs, giving them a squeeze. As you inhale, rise up, reach up. At the top, press the palms together. As you exhale, bend your elbows, dropping the thumbs toward the back of the heart. On the inhale, if it feels okay, you can press skull into forearms. Stay for your breath out one more cycle so you're not only getting an extra stretch in the triceps, but maybe you're doing something new. If your fingers are usually spread wide apart here, draw them together. Flip your prayer around to the front, and as you exhale, fold, Uttanasana. Press into your toes as you lift halfway up on the inhale with the option to reach your arms forward. As you exhale, bow. This time, hands clasp the Achilles tendons. As you inhale, squeeze up the calves, massaging. Make your hands into fists, and with the exhale, gently pound back down. Let go. And as you inhale, slowly roll up to stand. Circle your wrists as you rise. Leave your arms low. As you exhale, roll your right shoulder back and then your left. Pause in Tadasana for an inhalation, again noticing where have you landed? Are your feet in the same place as always? Or have you recommitted to that slightly different stance that's enough to light up the cerebellum? Palms, are they forward as usual if that's usual? Or have you spun them to the back or another way? Deep breath in through your nose. Gently part your lips, let the exhale fall out. And then go ahead and take a seat. So that was just a half sun salutation A, a half Surya Namaskar A, something you've done trillions of times, or hundreds at least. And you've just hopefully tried it about 5 new slightly different ways. That's something that surely you could work your way into a flow state doing. You know it so well. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to work at it. But by making a tiny little change that makes you think just enough to come back into a space of near radical presence, you might be able to next step into a higher state of true radical presence and flow state as you create new neural pathways that just make you happier, smarter, ready for life off the mat. And so, like I said, there's absolutely nothing wrong with habits or coming back to that place and that style and that sequence that makes us feel like we're home. But if you choose to explore and to change it up a little bit, just 3% or more, you might find something that you didn't even know that you were seeking.
Gosh, your experiment, it really worked because it was like a meditation, by counting your breaths or something, it keeps hooking you back to the presence rather than letting your mind drift. It really worked.
Good, it worked. Thank you so much. I've come to this belief because for a very long time I did my practice the same way all the time. It had evolved from a set sequence, from the Ashtanga sequence, into a creation of my own, but I was still very militant about it. And when I realized that I was allowed to change it, a lot more than just my practice changed. And so I wanted to share the power of making those tiny little changes that we all have the capacity to do, no matter what our experience or background, ability, physical or philosophical, wherever we are in our practice. And that's why I created the creative sequencing course for the Eckhart Academy. It was my dream come true to finally put into words and on film to share with others because I'm so passionate about it. I love to dance on my mat and have found that that makes my mind dance as well. So the course, well, back to Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. He is a creativity expert and, again, the godfather of flow. And he says that creativity comes from the heart. There's no other motivation than the joy of discovering something new. And it sounds kind of silly to imagine that a 3% change in your sun salutation A could bring that much joy. But for some of us, it has that much power. And I personally think that creativity is exquisitely beautiful and can be heartbreakingly painful too. It's the ultimate labor of love. And the creation of a new sequence can truly be an epic journey. Many potential obstacles arise, including creative blocks, imposter syndrome, too many ideas, fear of missing out, and so many more. But the creative process keeps me, as a teacher and a practitioner, inspired by what I'm practicing, excited about what I'm sharing, and present both on and off the mat. So hopefully this course will inspire you too. Each of the 10 modules in it begins with a full class that demonstrates how to integrate the topic or magic trick I'm talking about into real life practice and teaching. And in it, we'll deep dive into creativity, including the neuroscience of it and some of the roadblocks to it and what to do about them. And some of these are things that most of us are too familiar with, like perfectionism, impatience, comparison, dogma, the usual suspects. We will unpack more of the little things that make a big difference, and such as how to experiment through exploration, embodiment, and the things that lead to evolution of a practice and of a teacher. We'll work with intention as both a teacher and in your practice, because whether you've got students or not, you're definitely your own teacher. I share a beautiful basic-ish sequence that I designed a long time ago that I teach my teachers in training and I still use myself. And of course, how to pimp it out with things like warming up in different ways, layering the practice to build this multifaceted flow where you're warming up the body and teaching the sequence along the way, teaching people where they can stop and hang out if they've had enough, or if they want to work on this spot where they are, or if they'd like to progress in an intelligent, safe way. And repeating the way that most of us best learn, through repetition. Doing that in a sequence can be brilliantly creative as well. And we also go pretty extensively into switching directions on the mat, as this is a big part of my own practice that I love. I love twirling and spinning around the mat, sideways, backwards, and off. We get into innovation, such as using elements that aren't necessarily purely yogic. Things like dance and martial arts, or something that you've invented, as well as anatomical ways to sequence, which are also all laid out for you in the downloadable manual. And for those of you who are here right now, there's an exclusive 20% discount on the course for the next 48 hours. That is Anna 20. So thank you so much for listening to me. I would absolutely love to hear from you now if you have any questions or musings at all. I don't have all the answers, but I'll do my best. So if you've got any questions, please feel free to chime in or shout out, or to email me at any point. I'm really grateful that you were here to spend this afternoon with me.
Thank you so, so much. Sorry, my dog is barking in the background, but thank you. It was lovely. I hadn't realized, I mean, I had sort of realized well, obviously every class is very different. You know, you might be doing a flow, or you might be doing, yin yoga or something like that. But I hadn't appreciated, because I'm not a teacher, I hadn't appreciated that the teachers completely made up the sequences, and you could change it. I had always assumed it was a sort of formulaic thing.
Thank you. Though, to really be super honest, most of us aren't purely starting from scratch. There are so many pieces that are what we would now call traditional that we're spinning off of, which is one of the things that makes it so familiar. So as students, which I love being, we're able to follow along a really innovative class because the sequencing is familiar enough that we're able to flow, but with each teacher's special twist and perspective and language and additions that bring that opportunity to light up the cerebellum, to coordinate with other parts of the brain that don't typically illuminate together at the same time, and to bring us into that flowy place of awesomeness.
Thank you.
But really, like you said, the formulaic part, you could create a whole hour or more or less class of just the sun salutation A, with these tiny little tweaks and changes that make it feel so wildly different to our mind and therefore our body, which, as we know, are always communicating neurologically. Sounds like you should be a teacher.
Well, I've been doing yoga for about 20 years, but I haven't thought of doing it yet.
You'd be a natural. It's so lovely to see so many names that I've been seeing on the platform for so long. Thank you again and again for joining me. Please feel free to ask anything with your real voice or in the chat box. And of course, you're always so welcome to reach out to the lovely Masha, the brain and beauty behind the Ekhart Academy.
Is that not Esther?
Well, yes, of course, Esther. Esther at the heart and soul of everything. Masha behind the
Yeah.
rest.
Yeah. I love the fact that the platform has so many different teachers, because I'll come to my practice one day and I'll think, oh, I need something, I don't know, to cheer me up one day, or the next day I'll think, oh, I want to feel joy, or next day, oh, I've got a slightly sore back, I'll push in the search bar something for a sore back, and I'll get a completely different flow, different practice.
That has been, the vision of Esther and the dream that she brought to light that we're all so blessed to benefit from.
Yeah.
Glad to hear it's that way for you. Well, it is just pure joy to be here as a community. Thanks again for taking the time out of your day, wherever
you for doing the class.
I have a special guest who's just gotten home from school.
Hello.
Say hi.
You must show her the video of the English politician doing a Zoom call at home, and his children sneak in to the room, one child your daughter's age and one child in a stroller, in a sort of walking device, maybe is 1 year old. And then the mother comes crawling in, trying to drag them out. Have you seen that?
No.
Oh, Google it. Google it.
That
It's
does
very
sound
famous.
quite creative.
English politician.
Well, please, if you have the desire or the time to go to Eckhart-academy.com to check out my new creative sequencing course, along with a whole bunch of other brilliant courses by amazing teachers who I personally adore. And would you like to join me in bringing our hands together, a gesture of gratitude to ourselves, to each other, to all those who've been here before us, will be here after us? Together, we can take a deep breath in and a slow exhalation. Kind of drains down through us, relieving us of anything we don't need to take away. As we land upon whatever it is we're sitting on right now, which right now implies the earth upon which we all unite together. And from the earth, follow the next nourishing inhalation up through the physical elements of you. The atoms flip and spin upon themselves as they expand into cells, which become molecules that form tissues, that create the organs that comprise the systems, that expand to the outermost edges of you. And the exhalation, a release into right now, right here together. And again, the awareness drains back down through you, right out of you, into the roots beneath you. And from the depths of the roots, the next inhalation effortlessly lifts the awareness up through the energy channels, spiraling through every bit of you, out into the space surrounding you. Full of breath, if you feel it, pause for just a beat, knowing that right now you have all that you need. And as the effortless exhalation flows back down through the systems, the organs, the tissues, beyond the molecules, the chemicals, through the cells, the atoms resettle into this version of you. And the awareness seeps even deeper into the roots, which anchor you. And the next inhalation, the eyes pop open if closed. And with the exhale, maybe you blow a kiss or send a wave to your friends. Thank you again and again. Look forward to seeing you on the platform. If you join the course, leave me comments and I'll reply immediately. Thank you.